The Zephyrian research vessel Silent Dawn floated dead in space like a broken toy. Captain Veltar pressed his blue hands against the flickering communication console, while sparks flew from damaged circuits around him. His normally bright blue skin had turned a sickly green color from the radiation leaking through 17 hull breaches. The ship groaned and twisted as metal cooled in the vacuum of space. Through the cracked viewports he could see the debris field that had once been the Zephyrian colony on Kepler 442b, 3 billion lives snuffed out in less than 6 hours by creatures that called themselves the Void Hunters. Emergency. "Beacon is active, sir," announced Science Officer Quindar from her station. Her multiple eyes blinked rapidly as she worked the controls with her 4 arms. Broadcasting on all known frequencies at maximum power, Veltar nodded slowly. The Zephyrian Collective had always been peaceful explorers and researchers. They built beautiful cities on distant worlds and shared their knowledge freely with other species. They had never built weapons of war because they never thought they would need them. That mistake had cost them everything. "Any responses yet?" asked Veltar as he watched the life support readings drop steadily. They had maybe 12 hours of breathable air left in the damaged ship. "Yes, sir, but..." Quindar paused and her antennae drooped. "The Altarian Republic says they cannot spare any ships from their defensive positions. The Centauri Alliance sends their sympathy but claims they must remain neutral. The Galactic Commerce Federation is reviewing our request through proper channels." Each rejection felt like a physical blow to Veltar. He had served in the Collective's diplomatic corps for 30 years before becoming a ship captain. He knew these species well. The Altarians had 5,000 warships. The Centauri Alliance commanded the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. The Commerce Federation had enough mercenary groups on payroll to field an army. None of them would help. "Keep broadcasting," he ordered. "Someone out there must be willing to help us." The Void Hunters were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They arrived in ships that looked like living creatures with hulls that pulsed and writhed. They consumed entire civilizations not for resources or territory, but simply because they enjoyed the act of destruction. 3 Zephyrian colonies had already fallen to their hunger. The attack on Kepler 442b had been swift and brutal. The Void Hunter fleet had appeared without warning and overwhelmed the planet's defenses in minutes. Veltar had been conducting a routine survey mission in the outer system when the distress calls began. By the time Silent Dawn arrived at the colony, the planet was already burning. He had tried to evacuate survivors, but the Void Hunters had pursued his ship relentlessly. They seemed to take pleasure in the hunt itself. His crew of 12 had been reduced to 4 during the running battle that followed. Now those 4 survivors huddled in the damaged bridge waiting for either rescue or death. "Sir," Quindar called out with excitement in her voice, "we have a new response." Another government expressing sympathy asked Veltar bitterly. "No, sir. This one is different. The message is coming from the Sol System." Veltar frowned. The Sol System was home to a young species that had only achieved faster than light travel about 50 years ago. The humans, as they called themselves, were considered primitive by galactic standards. They used crude kinetic weapons and nuclear explosives when most civilized species had moved to clean energy weapons centuries ago. "What do they say?" Quindar translated the message from the human language called English. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. We have received your distress call. A rescue fleet is being assembled. Hold your position. Help is coming." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of sparking electronics. Veltar stared at the communication display in disbelief. The humans were actually going to help them. The youngest and least advanced species in the galaxy was the only one willing to answer their desperate plea. "Sir," whispered Engineer Kothran from the damage control station, "should we tell them about the Void Hunters? They may not understand what they are facing." Veltar considered this carefully. The humans had never encountered the Void Hunters before. Their small fleet of primitive ships would be no match for the massive armada that had destroyed 3 colonies. By coming to help the Zephyrians, they would only be adding themselves to the list of victims. But what choice did they have? Every other species in the galaxy had turned their backs on the Zephyrians in their hour of greatest need. Only the humans had shown any compassion. "Send them all the data we have on the Void Hunters," ordered Veltar. "Their ship designs, their weapons, their tactics, everything. They deserve to know what they are getting into." As the data transmission went out, Veltar wondered what kind of species these humans really were. According to the galactic databases, they were aggressive and warlike compared to most civilized races. They had only recently stopped fighting wars among themselves. Their military technology was crude but effective. Perhaps that was exactly what this situation needed. The established powers of the galaxy had grown soft and comfortable over the millennia. They preferred to debate and negotiate rather than take direct action. When faced with a threat like the Void Hunters, they chose safety over courage. But the humans were different. They were young and bold and apparently foolish enough to charge across the galaxy to help complete strangers. Veltar found himself hoping that their primitive weapons and aggressive nature might somehow make a difference. "How long until the human fleet arrives?" he asked. "Based on their hyperspace technology, approximately 6 days, sir, 6 days. They had to survive for 6 days in a badly damaged ship with dwindling life support. The Void Hunters were still out there somewhere, probably hunting for more prey." But for the first time since the attack began, Veltar felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Outside the cracked viewports, the stars shone coldly in the endless night. Somewhere among those distant suns, a human fleet was preparing to jump to their rescue. Whether they would arrive in time or whether they would be strong enough to face the void, hunters remained to be seen. But they were coming. When every other species had failed to act, the humans had answered the call. That had to count for something in the vast darkness of space where compassion was often the rarest element of all. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching through the massive viewports as humanity's largest fleet assembled around Earth's orbital shipyards. 47 vessels of every size and class floated in perfect formation against the backdrop of stars. Heavy battleships bristled with railgun turrets, while sleek destroyers darted between, the larger vessels like hunting wolves. At 62 years old, Morrison had spent his entire adult life preparing for moments like this. His weathered face bore scars from the border wars, and his gray eyes had seen more death than any human should. But he had never commanded a fleet this large or faced stakes this high. The entire galaxy was watching to see what humanity would do. "Admiral, we are receiving criticism from the Galactic Council," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park from her station. The young woman's voice remained steady, despite the weight of the message. "They say we are overstepping our boundaries and interfering in affairs beyond our understanding." Morrison's jaw tightened, but his expression remained calm. He had dealt with galactic politics before and knew how the older species viewed humanity. To them, humans were violent primitives who had barely crawled out of their own solar system. The fact that Earth was offering military assistance when the great powers refused was apparently embarrassing to the established order. "Tell the Council that humanity does not abandon those in need," he replied firmly. "Continue fleet preparations." Dr. Amanda Wright approached the command platform carrying a data tablet filled with analysis reports. The fleet's chief xenobiologist had been working around the clock since the Zephyrian distress call arrived. Her usually neat brown hair was disheveled and dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her mind was sharp as ever. "Admiral, I have completed the analysis of the Zephyrian data," she said, holding up the tablet. "These Void Hunters are unlike anything in the galactic databases. They do not conquer worlds for resources or territory. They consume entire civilizations for sport." Morrison nodded grimly. He had read the preliminary reports but wanted to hear Amanda's expert opinion. "What is their combat capability?" "Their ships appear to be partially biological with hulls that can adapt and regenerate damage. They use swarm tactics with vessels that learn from each encounter. Every species they have fought was defeated within days." Amanda paused to highlight key data on her tablet. "The Zephyrians estimate the main fleet has over 200 ships, 200 against 47, mused Morrison. "What about our tactical advantages?" Amanda almost smiled at the question. "Well, sir, the Void Hunters have adapted to fight energy weapons and defensive tactics over thousands of years. They have never faced an enemy that still uses kinetic projectiles and nuclear warheads. And our crews, human crews, are trained for aggressive tactics and independent thinking. Most galactic species rely on centralized command structures and standardized responses." Amanda's smile grew wider. "We are the only species crazy enough to charge into a battle we cannot win." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cross joined the conversation at that moment. At 31, he was the youngest ship captain in the fleet, but had earned his position through exceptional skill and courage. His destroyer UES Defiant was known throughout the Earth Defense Force for its daring missions and impossible victories. "Admiral, the crews are calling this Operation Guardian," Ryan reported with pride in his voice. They say it is time to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. Morrison looked out at the assembled fleet and felt a surge of pride in his species. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who knew they might not return home. Earth's limited industrial capacity had been stretched to build this fleet. Resources that could have improved life on Earth had been spent on weapons and ships to help complete strangers on the other side of the galaxy. But that was what made humans different. When others calculated costs and benefits, humans asked simpler questions. Was it right to help? Could they make a difference? Were lives at stake? The answers to those questions mattered more than politics or economics. Signal the fleet, Morrison commanded. We jump in 6 hours. The next few hours passed quickly as final preparations were completed. Weapon systems were checked and rechecked. Navigation computers plotted the hyperspace jump to the Kepler system. Medical bays were stocked with supplies for both human and alien physiology. Engineering teams made last-minute adjustments to shield generators and engine systems. Morrison walked through the ship during those final hours, speaking with his crew. In the weapons bay, he found Gunnery Sergeant Kate Murphy calibrating the main railgun batteries. The tough Irish woman had served in 3 colonial conflicts and knew her weapons better than anyone in the fleet. "How are we looking, Sergeant?" asked Morrison. "The guns are ready, Admiral," Kate replied without looking up from her work. These void hunters have never seen what a tungsten slug traveling at 30,000 kilometers per second can do to their fancy adaptive hulls. In the hangar bay, Morrison met with Colonel Nick Hayes, who commanded the fleet's Marine contingent. The broad-shouldered soldier was inspecting combat armor and boarding equipment with his characteristic attention to detail. "Expecting boarding actions, Colonel?" Morrison asked. "Always prepare for the worst, sir," Nick replied. "If we can take one of their ships intact, the intelligence value would be enormous." Morrison's final stop was the bridge where his senior staff was running through combat scenarios. Lisa Park had been promoted to Fleet Communications Coordinator and was managing data streams from 47 different ships. Her efficiency and calm demeanor had earned the respect of captains throughout the fleet. "Fleet status report," Morrison requested as he took his command chair. "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump," Lisa announced. "Navigation coordinates confirmed. Weapon systems armed and ready." Morrison looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew. These were the people he would trust with humanity's first major military action beyond their home system. Young and old, experienced and green, they were united by a simple belief that helping others was worth any risk. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison announced over the fleet communication system, "in a few minutes we will jump to the Kepler system to answer a distress call from the Zephyrian Collective. We do this not for glory or gain, but because it is right. The galaxy will judge humanity by our actions today. Let us show them what we are made of." The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, like hunters stepping into a deadly trap. Admiral Morrison gripped the command chair as reality reasserted itself around the UES Liberty. The massive view screen flickered to life, showing a sight that made even veteran officers draw sharp breaths. 200 Void Hunter ships filled the inner system like a swarm of predatory insects. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms and writhed as if alive. Some vessels were the size of human cruisers, while others dwarfed Earth's largest battleships. At the center of the formation, the crippled Zephyrian research vessel Silent Dawn drifted helplessly, surrounded by enemy scouts. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Lisa Park. "There are so many of them." Morrison studied the tactical display with the calm focus that had kept him alive through 30 years of military service. The numbers were worse than their worst-case scenarios, but he had learned long ago that dwelling on impossible odds was a luxury commanders could not afford. "Fleet positions," he ordered. "All ships have arrived safely." Admiral reported Navigation Officer Ben Turner. "Formation integrity maintained. Weapons systems online across the fleet." On the Silent Dawn, Captain Veltar watched his sensor displays with growing amazement. The 47 human ships looked tiny compared to the Void Hunter armada, but they had actually come. When every advanced civilization in the galaxy had refused to help, these primitive aliens had crossed the void to answer a distress call from complete strangers. "They really came," whispered Science Officer Quindar. 47 ships against 200. They must be either incredibly brave or completely insane. The answer came quickly over the open communication channels. Admiral Morrison's voice carried clearly across the system with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in desperate situations. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth. Fleet Void Hunter vessels, you have one opportunity to withdraw from this system immediately. If you refuse, we will consider your presence an act of aggression and respond accordingly. The response from the Void Hunter command ship was a sound unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was part roar, part scream, and part something else that human ears were not designed to process. The meaning, however, required no translation. It was pure predatory rage mixed with contempt for the small human fleet. Morrison nodded as if he had expected exactly that response. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. The enemy has declined our generous offer. You are authorized to engage at will. Show them what humanity is capable of. What followed shattered every assumption about warfare that galactic civilization had developed over thousands of years. Instead of forming defensive positions or attempting to negotiate the human, ships charged directly into the heart of the Void Hunter. Formation with weapons, blazing. The UES Liberty led the assault, with its massive railguns firing tungsten slugs at incredible velocities. The projectiles tore through Void Hunter shields and hulls like paper. The aliens had adapted their defenses against energy, weapons over millennia of conquest, but they had never faced kinetic projectiles moving at 30,000 kilometers per second. Captain Ryan Cross brought his destroyer UES, Defiant, screaming through the enemy formation at maximum acceleration. His ship was smaller and faster than the battleships, but carried enough firepower to cripple vessels 3 times its size. Nuclear-tipped missiles streaked from his launch tubes while point defense systems carved apart enemy fighters with streams of depleted uranium slugs. This is for every innocent life you have taken, Ryan shouted over the communication channel as his weapons found their targets. 3 Void Hunter cruisers exploded in brilliant fireballs as his missiles found weak points in their adaptive armor. The Void Hunters had conquered dozens of civilizations using the same tactics that had never failed them. They would swarm their enemies with overwhelming numbers while their ships adapted to counter whatever weapons were used against them. Within hours, most species would exhaust their energy reserves and be forced to surrender or die. But humans fought differently. When their primary weapons were countered, they switched to secondary systems. When those failed, they improvised. Captain Ellen Brooks of the UES Valiant found her energy weapons ineffective against an enemy dreadnought, so she rammed her cruiser directly into its hull at full speed. Both ships were destroyed, but the explosion took out 2 more Void Hunter vessels. The battle raged across the system for 6 brutal hours. Human ships fought with a desperation and creativity that the Void Hunters had never encountered. When ammunition ran low, they used debris as projectiles. When shields failed, they rammed enemy vessels. When all seemed lost, individual captains found ways to keep fighting. Gunnery Sergeant Kate Murphy kept her railguns firing long after the UES Liberty's main power grid failed. Working by emergency lighting, she manually loaded shells and aimed by visual targeting, until the weapon barrels glowed white-hot from continuous use. Her determination inspired the entire crew to fight beyond their limits. The Void Hunter fleet began to falter as their adaptive systems struggled to counter human unpredictability. They had learned to defend against standardized galactic weapons and tactics, but humans refused to follow any recognizable pattern. Every ship fought differently using whatever worked in the moment. Admiral Morrison coordinated the fleet battle from his damaged bridge, while sparks flew from overloaded systems around him. Half his ships were dead or dying, but they had accomplished something no other species had managed. The Void Hunter formation was breaking apart as their command ship burned from multiple impacts. Admiral called Lisa Park from her communication station. The enemy fleet is beginning to withdraw. Their command vessel has suffered critical damage. Morrison watched on the tactical display as the massive Void Hunter ships began jumping to hyperspace. They were retreating for the first time in their recorded history. 19 human vessels had been destroyed or disabled, but the remaining 28 had driven off an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. On the Silent Dawn, Captain Veltar stared at his sensors in amazement. The impossible had happened. The primitive human fleet had not only survived the encounter but actually won. As he watched human rescue shuttles approached, his damaged vessel to begin evacuating his crew, the young species from the edge of galactic space had crossed the void to help strangers and somehow succeeded where the greatest military powers in the galaxy would have failed. News of humanity's victory over the Void Hunters spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. On 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at their stars and whispered the name human, with something they had not felt in centuries. Hope mixed with disbelief as reports confirmed what seemed impossible. The youngest species in galactic civilization had accomplished what the ancient powers could not. Admiral Jake Morrison stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council on Proxima Prime 3 weeks after the battle. The massive chamber held representatives from over 200 species, and the air hummed with a dozen different translation systems. Morrison felt the weight of their attention as he approached the central speaking platform. His uniform still bore scorch marks from the battle, and his left arm remained in a medical support. Braced behind him walked the survivors of his senior staff. Dr. Amanda Wright carried detailed reports on Void Hunter, technology captured during the battle. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Cross limped slightly from injuries sustained when his ship was nearly destroyed. Communications Officer Lisa Park held recordings of the entire engagement for the Council's review. Honored counselors. Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Humanity did not intervene in the Kepler system to gain territory recognition or political advantage. We acted because we believed it was the right thing to do. A ripple of translation echoes followed his words as various species processed the statement. Counselor Thexnar of the Altarian Republic shifted uncomfortably in his environmental suit. His species commanded 5,000 warships but had refused the Zephyrian plea for help, citing political complications. Admiral Morrison. Thexnar spoke with carefully controlled diplomacy. While your species' actions were admirable, they have created significant complications. The Void Hunters now know Earth's location. You have made yourselves a target for retaliation. Morrison's expression remained steady. Then we will face that threat when it comes, Counselor. Just as we faced it when we helped the Zephyrians, murmurs swept through the assembly at his calm response. Most species would be terrified at the prospect of Void Hunter retaliation. The humans seemed to view it as simply another challenge to overcome. Captain Veltar rose from the Zephyrian delegation section. His blue skin had returned to its normal bright color and his injuries had healed, but the gratitude in his large eyes was unmistakable. When he spoke, his voice carried the formal weight of an official government statement. Honored Council, I speak for the entire Zephyrian collective when I say that humanity has shown us what true civilization looks like. We formally request to establish a mutual defense alliance with Earth and pledge our full support to their cause. The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful isolationist policies. They had never formed military alliances with anyone, preferring to rely on diplomatic neutrality for protection. This unprecedented move demonstrated how deeply the human rescue had affected them. Dr. Amanda Wright stepped forward to address the council next. Her scientific background gave her words additional weight as she presented humanity's proposal for galactic reform. Honored counselors, we propose the formation of a new organization to supplement the existing council structure. The Guardian Alliance would provide immediate response capabilities for species facing extinction-level threats. Any member world could call for help and the Alliance would respond with direct military action. The chamber erupted in debate as representatives argued over the implications. The Galactic Council had spent centuries perfecting a system of careful deliberation and diplomatic process. The idea of taking immediate military action without extensive committee review was revolutionary. Counselor Zethka of the Centauri Alliance stood to voice the concerns of the established powers. Her species had ruled their sector for over 10,000 years and viewed change with deep suspicion. This proposal undermines the authority of existing institutions, she declared. The council system has maintained galactic peace for millennia. We cannot abandon proven methods for the reckless impulses of a single young species. Morrison felt anger rise in his chest, but kept his voice level when he responded. Respectfully, Counselor, your system failed the Zephyrians completely. While you debated proper channels and political implications, an entire species faced extinction. Sometimes immediate action is more valuable than perfect process. The debate continued for hours as representatives argued over precedent authority and the dangers of military intervention. But even as the council debated requests for alliance membership, were flooding in from across the galaxy. 6 species formally applied within the first day. By the end of the week, that number had grown to 23. The Corvani Mining Consortium had been terrorized by pirates for years while the Council debated trade regulations. They joined immediately. The Deltari Republic faced aggressive expansion from neighboring empires, but could not get Council support due to territorial disputes. They signed up eagerly. The Nixari Commonwealth was slowly being consumed by a plague that their medical resources could not combat. They hoped Alliance members might share advanced treatments. Each new member species brought their own ships and resources to the growing alliance. The Zephyrians contributed advanced shield technology and medical knowledge. The Corvani provided industrial capacity and mining expertise. The Deltari offered skilled engineers and tactical specialists. The Nexari brought biological research facilities and pharmaceutical knowledge. Within 6 months, the Guardian Alliance had become a force that rivaled the established galactic powers. Their combined fleet numbered over 800 ships from dozens of different species. More importantly, they had something the ancient powers had lost: the will to act decisively when lives were at stake. The Council found itself increasingly irrelevant as species turned to the Alliance for solutions to urgent problems. Pirates who had operated freely under Council protection were hunted down by Alliance task forces. Aggressive empires discovered that attacking Alliance members brought swift retaliation. Medical emergencies received immediate aid rather than bureaucratic delays. Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of Guardian Station 6 months after the Kepler battle. The massive space habitat had been built in the neutral Wolf system as Alliance headquarters. Through the viewport, he could see ships from 40 different species conducting joint training exercises. Human destroyers flew alongside Zephyrian research vessels, while Corvani heavy cruisers practiced formations with Deltari fast attack craft. The sight would have been impossible just 1 year earlier. Now it was becoming routine as species learned to work together for common goals rather than competing for individual advantage. Morrison reflected on how much had changed since that desperate day when the Zephyrian distress call reached Earth. Humanity had answered, because it seemed like the right thing to do. They had not expected to change the galaxy, but their simple act of courage had started something bigger than anyone imagined. 2 years after the Battle of Kepler, Admiral Jake Morrison walked slowly through the corridors of Guardian Station. The massive space habitat orbited Wolf 359 in neutral territory and had become the beating heart of galactic cooperation. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the largest peaceful armada in recorded history. Ships from 67 different species floated in perfect formation while crews trained together for missions that would have been impossible just 3 years earlier. Morrison's hair had turned completely gray during his time as Alliance commander, but his step remained firm and his eyes stayed sharp. The responsibilities of leading a multi-species military organization had aged him quickly, but he would not trade the burden for anything. Every day brought new challenges, and every challenge proved that the galaxy was becoming a better place. Admiral Lisa Park approached him in the central corridor, carrying the daily intelligence briefings. Her promotion from communications officer to fleet intelligence chief had been well earned through 2 years of outstanding service. The young woman who had once nervously reported Council criticism now commanded respect from alien officers 3 times her age. Admiral, the morning reports show encouraging developments across all sectors, she said, matching his pace as they walked toward the command center. The Void Hunters have not been detected in 8 months. Our intelligence networks believe they have retreated to the galactic rim beyond monitored space. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. They will return eventually, Lisa. Species like that do not change their fundamental nature overnight. When they do come back, they will be better prepared and more dangerous than before. But when they return, they will not face isolated, defenseless colonies, Lisa pointed out with quiet confidence. They will face the entire Alliance fleet, plus whatever new members have joined by then. The Alliance had grown far beyond anyone's original expectations. What began as humanity's desperate attempt to help strangers had evolved into the galaxy's primary force for mutual protection and aid. 67 species now flew under the Guardian Alliance banner, and more applications arrived every week. The success went far beyond military victories. The Alliance Medical Corps had stopped 3 separate plague outbreaks using combined research from multiple species. Engineering teams had built infrastructure on dozens of developing worlds, Disaster response units had saved millions of lives during natural catastrophes that would have overwhelmed individual planetary governments. Dr. Amanda Wright met them at the command center entrance. With her usual stack of reports and analysis data, her promotion to Chief Science Officer had put her in charge of the Alliance Research Division, which now operated facilities in 12 different star systems. The breakthrough technologies emerging from multi-species cooperation were advancing galactic civilization at an unprecedented pace. "Admiral, we have received another priority distress call," Amanda announced as she handed over the communication transcript. "The hegemony of Kresh is requesting immediate assistance with what they describe as an extinction-level threat to their home system." Morrison read the message carefully. The Kresh were a proud warrior species who had never asked anyone for help in their 8,000-year history. If they were desperate enough to call the Alliance, the situation must be truly serious. "What kind of threat are we looking at?" he asked. "Their star is showing signs of premature instability," Amanda replied, consulting her scientific data. "Solar flares and radiation surges that could sterilize all life in the system within 6 months. They believe it may be artificial in origin." Morrison felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. Another crisis, another chance to prove that cooperation was stronger than isolation. He had hoped for a quiet retirement back on Earth, but the galaxy seemed determined to keep humanity busy with impossible challenges. "Fleet status report," he requested as they entered the main command center. The massive chamber buzzed with activity as officers from dozens of species coordinated operations across multiple sectors. Human voices mixed with alien languages while translation systems worked constantly to maintain clear communication. The diversity would have seemed chaotic to outside observers, but Morrison saw the beautiful efficiency of different perspectives working toward common goals. Captain Ryan Cross looked up from the tactical display where he had been planning patrol routes for the Outer Rim sectors. His promotion to Alliance Fleet Captain had put him in charge of coordinating ship movements across 67 different naval traditions. The young officer who had charged into hopeless battle at Kepler now possessed the diplomatic skills needed to command alien crews with completely different military cultures. "We have 43 ships available for immediate deployment," Admiral Ryan reported. "The Zephyrian scientific vessels can analyze the stellar instability, while Corvani heavy cruisers provide system defense. Human fast attack squadrons can investigate potential enemy activity in neighboring systems." Morrison studied the proposed fleet composition with approval. The Alliance had learned to combine each species' unique strengths into coordinated responses that no single civilization could match. Zephyrian science, Corvani engineering, human aggression, and dozens of other specializations working together. "Approved, Captain," Morrison decided. "Launch in 6 hours with full authority to take whatever action seems necessary." As the command staff dispersed to prepare the mission, Morrison remained at the central display watching status reports update in real time. Ships across the Wolf system began moving toward jump coordinates, while supply vessels loaded specialized equipment for stellar analysis. The efficiency spoke to 2 years of constant practice and refinement. Morrison remembered the desperate hours before the Kepler battle, when humanity's small fleet had seemed woefully inadequate against impossible odds. Now the Alliance could deploy task forces larger than most species' entire military establishments. More importantly, they could deploy them with confidence that every crew member understood they were fighting for something bigger than territorial advantage or economic gain. Dr. Amanda Wright approached him at the display with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Admiral, do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had ignored that first Zephyrian distress call?" Morrison considered the question seriously. The decision to help had seemed simple at the time, but its consequences had reshaped galactic civilization. Without human intervention, the Zephyrians would have died along with dozens of other species. The Void Hunters would still be consuming civilizations across the galaxy. The ancient powers would still be debating proper procedures while innocents suffered. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted, "but I cannot imagine making any other choice. When someone calls for help, you answer if you can. Everything else follows from that basic principle." The Alliance represented more than military cooperation or political reform. It embodied the idea that moral obligations transcended species boundaries, and that helping strangers was worth any personal cost. Humanity had stumbled into galactic leadership, not through conquest or manipulation, but through the simple act of caring about others.